Welcome to Save It for the Blind podcast. We're here with Jeremiah Dowdy with Field to Plate. Thanks for coming on, Jeremiah, and kind of tell us about what you're doing in the food space and kind of in the R3 recruitment.
Yeah, so my name is Jeremiah Dowdy, born and raised in Southern California. So thanks for having me on a California waterfowl podcast because I'm sick of getting on the Alabama ones where we're not laying in the middle of the field shooting a million greenheads. But yeah, so I am a wild game chef based out of California, and I travel around and I write recipes for a lot of outdoor companies, from Traeger to Vortex to Mossy Oak and fill in the blank. And so it's kind of a cool gig. And here in California, I've been blessed to be able to be part of the R3 program. A lot of listeners know what that is, but it's a federally granted program that reintroduces hunters, maintains hunters, and we can recruit new hunters into the hunting industry. And so it's a cool program that is funded where we can get youth, veterans, women, adults out hunting for the first time, just like we finally are able to have a free hunting day, which I think was awesome, where we can get people out there to hunt. And we took, you can take people out in the blind with you for a free hunting day, which to me is pretty awesome that we can be a part of something like that in California, because I never thought I'd see that, in my age. So,
yeah, and kind of tell us about your journey. You didn't grow up as a hunter, correct?
No, I grew up as a bird hunter.
Okay.
Born and raised as a bird hunter. Started bird hunting when I was 6 years old. But down here in Southern California, it's not like we've got all your rice fields and all your stuff out, in YOLO and stuff that you guys can go out and do that kind of stuff. We've got two places down here, San Jacinto Wildlife, as well as Worcester. And it's the draw system. And I put in for years and get one or two draws here or there. So dove was primarily what we hunted here in Southern California. We'd go to Colorado River and we would just drill dove for the opening season. And we go for second season. And then when I turned 18, I realized I got to do more than just shoot dove twice a year. So I taught myself how to waterfowl hunt, taught myself how to turkey hunt, quail hunt, chucker hunt. Got into some areas that have pheasant up in Barstow, Bakersfield area. And really kind of just dove headfirst into, if it flies, it goes on the grill, it dies type aspect and mentality. And then fast forward to 2007, I started getting really, really sick eating food. And I worked in restaurants, high-end restaurants. And so as a chef and as a front of the house manager, getting sick eating food at a restaurant really isn't, ideal and prime. So kind of give you the Reader's Digest version for any of you that are younger. Reader's Digest was a book that came out. But through a lot of trial and error for over a year, and a lot of doctors found out that I actually had a super rare case where I'm allergic to bovine fat. So I'm allergic to cows in a sense, or domesticated bison, buffalo, anything that falls within that bovine realm. Highly allergic, where it makes me violently ill for about 8 to 12 hours. And then it's a 4-day recovery after that. So think about the worst flu you've ever had in your life, 30 minutes after you eat anything that contains bovine fat. And in that realm, there's a lot of oils, fats, fill in the blanks of all these different things that kind of categorize with that same enzyme that my body's allergic to. And so for me, it kind of was okay, great. Well, I was born and raised an Irish kid, eating meat and taters every single night. My mom would go to Costco and buy those 40-pound, giant things of ground beef, and that's what we eat, as a family of 7 kids. And it kind of threw my whole world into this, just what do I do? What's next? Because you can only eat so much chicken. And, you can only shoot so many ducks down here in Southern California. You can only shoot so many quail, so many ducks, so many pheasants, so many quail. And really, how many ribs can you eat in a week? And so I was actually getting ready to turkey hunt. See all the turkey feathers behind me for fall season. San Diego opened up a fall season in 2006. And so I was going out to archery hunt and getting ready. And I'm at the range down here by us. And this old timer gets out of his car, out of his truck, walks over, opens up his bow, and it's all camouflaged out. He's got a Sitka shirt on, and I'm like, this is when Sitka just hit the market. So I was like, oh my gosh, this dude must hunt, because I'm in Southern California. No one comes out in camouflage unless it says like Gucci on it. Right. And so I'm like, dude, where are you going? And he's like, oh, I'm getting ready to go to Wyoming to go hunt antelope. I was like, dude, I wish I could hunt, big game, but it's so expensive. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a bird hunter since I was 6 years old. I know how to work a shotgun better than anybody else, and he's like, dude, the tags are $38 for a doe tag. And that includes license and tag in Wyoming. I grabbed my bow, put it back in my case, locked it all, walked back to my truck, drove home, went online and bought 4 over-the-counter tags because that's back when you could buy 4 over-the-counter doe tags. Called up my buddy who's a fireman. I said, hey, what are you doing next week? He goes, nothing. It's my 7 days off. I was like, you want to drive to Wyoming and shoot antelope with me? He's like, oh, we don't know how to big game hunt. He's my bird hunting buddy. I was like, nope. So we literally packed in his Honda Civic and we drove 18 hours to Casper, got there at 2 o'clock in the morning, slept in the Walmart parking lot in Casper when it's snowing, freezing our butts off. We go out and we hunt public land for 6 days and just beat the crap out of ourselves. We don't know what we're doing. We got in on herds, but we're trying to hunt them like deer when they're not deer. We didn't realize that they have the best eyesight out of the entire big game community. And finally we filled tags. We took it to a butcher. We slept in a hotel that night because we were sick of sleeping in tents, freezing our butts off. And get home and I hated the meat. I was like, this is disgusting. Like I did all that work, all that effort for meat that I don't like. But again, that mentality a lot of us have as hunters growing up with dads who also hunted was like, if you kill it, you eat it. If you took the effort and time to take its life, you're going to eat every ounce of that. Me and my brother shot a crow in our backyard when we were like 13. And it's a city crow, so it's disgusting, eating trash, garbage, probably dead animals on the side of the road. And we were in the backyard with pellet guns and popped one off. And my dad comes home from work and there's all these crows because, if you ever shoot a crow, it's like a murder above your house, right? They just going crazy. My dad's like, who shot a crow? My little brother like, well, I don't know. I don't know who shot a crow. He goes out and finds it in the bushes and he's like, okay, eat it. And I vividly remember that in my mind, like the most disgusting, foul, overcooked with just, seasoning salt on it. And I'm like, okay, I got to make this antelope taste good. Come on, you work in a restaurant, you cook for a living. How are you going to make this taste good? And so started really understanding the flavor profiles that went into this antelope and that strong sage flavor from it, primarily eating that in its diet. And I made a meal for my 2-year-old daughter and my wife, and they're like, this is good. I was like, this is good. And that's kind of where that mindset switched for me all of a sudden. Like, hey, there's nobody out there teaching adults how to do this. We have so many programs for little kids to go out and learn how to hunt, but there's no one who's going to teach, a 30-year-old dude to go shoot an antelope because that's my spot. That's my whatever. And so I kind of, from that moment, founded From Field to Plate, where I said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be someone to teach adults. Because this is really before YouTube was like full of just people doing what they're doing on YouTube now, right? And fast forward to today, I quit my job and I'm doing this full time, teaching, training. I've taken out 400 brand new adult hunters. That's brand new. Within the past 5 years, I've taken out over 406 brand new adult hunters. There's about 30% of those which are female. The rest are, from the youngest being 18 to the oldest being, I just took out an 83-year-old for his first hunt ever. And so you look at where I started struggling. When I was gutting that antelope, I had a little pocket knife for him. When I got 13, that pocket knife, the Swiss Army that has like the toothpick and the tweezers. Yeah. And that's what I'm out there gutting this antelope with, that I'd probably whittled a million sticks with and never sharpened it. And I'm like, this is stupid. Why do people hunt? Like, give me a bird where I can just shove my thumb in there, pluck it, that's it. I don't need a knife to clean a bird. And now I look at where I am today and walking people through the process of, this is what it means hands-on to really be involved with your food and what it means to change who you are as a person from the inside out, and respect that animal with every single ounce of being, and not just breasting your bird, not just taking the back straps and grinding the rest of the deer. There's a process to this animal. And that is kind of where I've made my niche in this outdoor industry, is just being the guy that's going to answer a question respectfully. I get death threats daily, and it's like, bring it on. Like, if I'm going to die for what I'm doing, then it's going to be a bigger cause,
Yeah,
So,
we we kind of do similar events like that. Obviously, probably not as many, but on our own properties where we're bringing these adult onset hunters in and teaching them all about waterfowl hunting, how to cook a bird, clean it, and then where to go after our own event. Are your specific events, are they just in Southern California? Are you partnering with clubs and other properties outside of California? I mean, and what are these people going out and hunting?
yeah. So I'm working on a new waterfowl lodge in Washington. We're going to roll that out next year. It's an absolutely gorgeous lodge near the Columbia River. Just gadwall, widgeon, the big birds coming in, all just fat ducks. And we're working on with that. We're going to do a whole class where it's coming in, learn the mechanics of a shotgun, how to hold it, how to, how we're not really aiming a shotgun, we're shooting a shotgun. So the mechanics of where to put it to your cheek versus your shoulder, where to look down, how to hold it, how to swing through, and then taking them out there and teaching them the next step. This is how you set a decoy spread. This is how you learn how to call. Because guess what? When you're in deep water, you're not going to be doing the feeding call, right? I hate going out deep water and hearing guys. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, have you ever heard a duck doing that in deep water? And so teaching the whole process and then coming back and teaching them how to the three really methods of cleaning a duck. So skinning a duck, breasting a duck, plucking a duck. What are those three methods and how do they look? And then applying that to the kitchen. You'll take your duck and cook your duck. You're going to cook a skinned duck recipe. You're going to cook a plucked duck recipe, and you're going to cook a breasted duck recipe, and how it applies to what that duck is and how to not mask that flavor, but enhance it. So I've got waterfowl classes. I've got whitetail classes that we do a lot of stuff in Texas, just because I have more free range in Texas. And there's these, 40,000 acre low fence ranchers that are given like 200 deer tags that they have to fill every single year. Government says, kill 200 deer. They say, okay. So we can take people in there and shoot pretty much whatever we want. So go in there and shoot a bunch of does because it's a meat class. And there's no real like, oh, well, his was bigger than this and that. A doe is a doe.
Yeah.
We do hog classes. I've taken out celebrities, taken out sports stars on hog classes. We're getting together a hockey class for some of the LA Kings guys after season, hopefully after they win the Stanley Cup. Sorry for all you sucky Shark fans in the Northern California area. But we are kind of just doing that. There's also some wild turkey stuff that we've got lined up for Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas. So it's kind of this whole gambit of, if you want to learn it, we're going to find somewhere for you to learn it. I still do that antelope hunt every year. So it's been 10 years doing that antelope hunt. And I still take out 4 to 5 brand new hunters every year with me on that trip. That's my personal trip. And teach them how to hunt antelope and how to process the antelope and learn the whole process. So for me, it's kind of this nonstop. But then here in Southern California, I work along with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, where we do the youth hunt. So we've got a youth pheasant hunt coming up actually this weekend in Blythe, California, which is the Robinson Memorial Pheasant Hunt, which Danny Robinson was a huge advocate on youth hunting here in Southern California. Him and his partner, Mary, but they both passed away of cancer. So we're doing this memorial hunt for them. We also have got some other pheasant and duck stuff, California, as well as doing duck classes for Department of Fish and Wildlife in Arizona. So we're doing it down in Cibola, where we'll do like youth and women hunts in Cibola and teach them how to do the whole process with waterfowl as well. So, it's kind of nonstop.
Did you get into cooking at a young age? How did your culinary kind of career start?
Yeah, it's food has always been a part, because again, like I said, I'm Irish, so you're always eating, right? You're always eating, you're always drinking. There's always food and there's always beer. And so in my family, there was always barbecue was a huge aspect to it. Like my grandpa was an amazing pit master. My dad, it was all about the charcoals and then temperatures. And then when you would go in the house, the women were doing different cooking, but it was always women and men cooking full time. And then my house, I've got a million siblings. So my mom used to always have us cook a meal with her during the week since there were 7. And my sisters used to pay me to go cook with mom because they didn't want to cook. So I would get their allowance to go cook. And so just learning this whole idea behind it. Then I got into high school and realized that when you cook for somebody, it really kind of opens up that door, breaks all the barriers. And so if you really wanted to, getting good with that girl, it was like, hey, look, I baked you a cake. Or, hey, look, I made you a lasagna. And they're like, you made lasagna? Yeah. And they're like, oh my gosh, you want to go on a date? And so it kind of just flowed that, went into college and didn't take the culinary route, took the cultural anthropology, the study of humans and the study of culture, and realized that all cultures are surrounded by food, right? You can look at a culture and define a culture by what it's eating. And yes, there's different costumes and different this and that, but at the core of it, when people think of Mexico, they think of food. When people think of the Middle East, they start thinking of food. When they think of France, they think of pastries and, you start to look at these cultures based on food. So then I got into the restaurant industry and realized that no matter how many people were fighting, as soon as the food hit the table, everyone stopped fighting and they were enjoying their food. And I said, I got to do this. I got to get people happy about food. And so that's kind of where it all started, and started developing recipes where people, enjoyed it. And I got asked by a magazine one time, they're like, what's the best part about being a chef? And I said, the silence after the first bite. Because when everyone takes a bite, the table's silent, right? Even think about Thanksgiving. It's, and then the first bite of turkey and mashed taters and everything goes in, and all of a sudden it's quiet at the table for a split second. And everyone's minds are being flooded with emotions and memories and endorphins of what it does. Just like you guys talking about sipping the whiskey. You were telling us a story of your dad pouring whiskey, and you were so excited about it. It's a drink. It's a drink. And so for food has the same mindset. And so as hunters, we do everything from wanting to understand that animal to the core of what its wings look like in the sky, what its beaks look like with a silhouette of, the early morning sunrise. And then a lot of us are just breasted out and don't even care about it. For me, it's like that the story itself doesn't end until we're sitting around the table laughing. And I'm like, let me tell you about this duck that you guys are eating. And there's this whole involvement. I've got 2 little girls, and they went out and shot doves. And as they're plucking it for the second season, they're like, we're going to make this and we're going to make that. And then we're sitting around the table and they're talking to people about the dove hunt as they're eating dove. To me, that's culture. We have defined a hunting culture. We have defined a group of people that are brought together by a bite of food. And I think that's what's beautiful, that it doesn't matter if I'm from Southern California and you're from Texas and you hate us because of our governor. When I put food on the table, all of a sudden we have this common ground, and it's absolutely gorgeous.
And what do you think the common hunter, what do they screw up? Because you do hear that of, oh, I do go to Wyoming, I do shoot a couple antelope a year. I absolutely hate antelope, and I give it away. And to me, antelope is it's favorite. Phenomenal. My favorite meat.
Yeah, my top 2 now.
Yeah, but I mean, you hear that, and you hear guys say the story. Hey, you cook a duck, you wrap it in bacon, and then you fry it, and then you throw the duck away and eat the bacon. Ha 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 ha! And you're like, as a duck hunter, you're like, dude, it's you. Yeah. It's the cook. I mean, so in your opinion, what are the things that people are getting wrong about, waterfowl and game specific in terms of how are they preparing it and cooking it?
I think cooking it like their grandpa did. and don't get me wrong, but the mindset behind food itself has changed. We're so quick on getting the newest gear to be better hunters, right? Just look at bow hunters. They spend millions of dollars a year getting the next bow. Bowtech came out with a new bow. The cams are a little bit smaller, so I got to get that Bowtech. Well, Matthews came out with one that weighs 1 ounce less. I got to get a Matthews. Or us as shotgun guys were like, oh, well, that new Benelli came out, and the way that the gas works so much better in it, right? We're so quick to evolve in that, but when it comes to the culinary aspect of it, we're like, it's gross. Grandpa said it's gross, so wrap it in bacon. Make it into a popper. Just breast it because I don't have the time. And I think the biggest thing that people realize is when they say that I don't have time. You had time to scout. You had time to get up at 3 a.m. You had time to go out and throw out 124 decoys. You had time to make sure you only had 25 shells in the blind with you. You had time to make sure your shotgun was clean. You had time to train your dog. You had time to take the effort to shoot those birds. You had the time to drive home, and you get home, you're like, I don't got the time to do it, to deal with it. No, it's just a lazy mentality. And I think when people get by that, think about, you said antelope. I can't tell you how many times I would go into town and there would just be antelope in the back of people's truck. 80 degrees, and they're in there eating Burger King. And I walk in, I'm like, whose antelope? Oh, it's mine. Antelope meat sucks anyway, because you're leaving it in the back of the truck for 8 hours and 80 degrees where it's already starting to deteriorate.
Yeah.
Antelope have this really crazy thing where as soon as they die, they start to decompose faster than any other animal. You can shoot it. If any of you have shot an antelope, the moment you shoot it, their hair starts to fall out.
Yeah.
You can
Everywhere.
Everywhere.
you can try to pull it.
Over everything.
And if you grab the feet and drag it 2 feet, the whole back of that antelope is bald. It's not like dragging a deer. We can drag a deer across, the canyons and come at it, and it's like, oh, I got a little scratch. No, it will be completely down to leather if you drag it 10 feet. Well, that same thing that happens with its hair being released is the same thing where the body starts to decompose and it starts to create, the blood sits, the hemoglobin sits, everything sits in this animal and it starts to just decompose. So the faster you get that animal cool and on ice, even if you don't have time to skin it, we'll keep a big old huge ice chest full of 20-pound bags of ice when we go antelope hunting. If we're out and we're shooting 3 or 4, we don't have time to break them down before we get back to camp, we'll throw that whole bag of ice into that cavity. Get it as cold as you can, right? Same thing. I look at duck hunters. I watched some guy, he shot a bunch of early morning ducks, and he's just hanging them on the side of the blind where the sun's coming in. And those ducks are just cooking. The dude's sitting there till 2 o'clock, and that sun's just roasting those birds the whole time. And he gets back to the car. He's like, man, these birds stink. I'm like, well, no, duh. You literally, would you go to the grocery store and buy a whole chicken and just leave the chicken outside, and then at 8 hours later go, I'm going to cook this chicken? You're going to throw that chicken away, right? And so as hunters, we're not taking the time to process our animals properly, right? Like dove hunters, we'll throw it or pheasant hunters, chucker hunters, quail hunters, we throw it in our back, and the heat of our back is cooking, keeping those birds warm. It's like, I know it's not pretty for a picture, but rip that head off. Let that blood start to flow out of that bird, cool that bird off. Ducks, the same sort of way. Put them down low. If you have an ice chest, throw them in an ice chest. A lot of times I'll take like a fish stringer and keep it in the water, right? And these birds are sitting there floating in the freezing cold water on top of it. And it's this mindset of taking your game back, taking it back to what it was. I read a lot of books, and there's a book about Native Americans. They used to take rabbits, and so they would hunt rabbits. You always see the pictures, the paintings of the rabbits hanging off the side of the horse, right? So they would take these rabbits and they would do the squeeze method. They would go from the ribs, and it was like milking a cow. They would squeeze all the guts and intestines out of the back half of that rabbit. So you can actually sit there and squeeze it. Everything pops out of the rabbit. No more guts, no more anything. And they hang that rabbit. So now it's still clean from dust, but there's no nastiness in there. And it's amazing. You could take 2 rabbits, rear end one and keep one whole. The flavor profile on those rabbits are completely different, even though you shot them on the same road in the same field in the same time. So I think that's people's biggest problem is just being lazy. And
what about culinary technique? Like, overcooking, undersalting, just something simple that you see coming from maybe new hunters or even people that have been doing it forever that could be a quick fix for folks that think, this game doesn't taste good.
Yeah. Get on Amazon and buy a $12 instant read thermometer. It's your best friend. You can buy expensive ones. You can buy cheap ones. As long as it reads that temperature, it'll work. And I think that's a huge hindrance to a lot of people as well, is cooking it past where it should be cooked.
And what is that temperature, in your opinion, of past?
For ducks, medium. Yeah. Medium is too cooked for a wild duck. You want to eat that duck, rare to medium rare, and you want to eat, even like quail and duck, dove. I grew up eating dove where we'd breast them out, we'd season them with, Lowry's seasoning salt, throw it on the grill till it was done. We're sitting there chewing on it. I'm like, this sucks, right? Well, look at the French culinary cooks when they're cooking pigeon, right? They're cooking pigeon to 125 to 130 degrees internal temperature. We don't have the same bacteria we're going to be found in the fecal matter of a domesticated chicken, from your name the bacteria that's going to make you sick. We don't have that when we're looking at wild animals. And so when we're processing these animals, we're clean. Our hands are clean. There's no cross-contamination. We can cook those animals to that temperature of that 130, like the French cuisine. And all of a sudden your dove don't taste livery. They're tasting beautiful. Duck, when you're overcooking it, they can really take that strong iron taste, right? Well, the more it cooks, as the juices go in the middle, it's going to condense all that flavor. And you're going to take that bite and like, oh, I just don't like it. And so when you understand that medium to medium rare on a lot of animals is perfect. Like the perfect temp for like a steak for me, for like a venison steak, is like 130. So pulling it off at 125, letting it rest to 130. Whoa, I don't have the crust on it. Well, then reverse sear it. Pull it at 110. Get a flaming hot cast iron skillet at 500 degrees. Put some butter, some oil, some garlic, some rosemary, some thyme. Roll that sucker around in there. It's going to get hard and crusty on the outside. Slice into it, and you're still at 130, 135. And so all of those aspects of understanding temps and times are completely different. Like even this Thanksgiving, I had 33 text messages of people saying, "Hey, how long do I cook my turkey?" I was like, "It's not about time, it's about temperature. As soon as the bird hits 165, pull it." Well, yeah, but how long is that going to take? No clue. No clue at all. And so you read these recipes of these people, and a lot of these wild game people too, they'll put out there like, "You're going to cook your deer for 45 minutes." And I'm like, well, your deer is going to be overcooked. Sometimes you'll put on that backstrap and it'll only take 5 minutes to reach temperature. Sometimes it'll take 33 minutes to reach temperature. It just all depends on the animal. If you're getting a fatty gadwall off the rice fields, like your guy you were talking to earlier, it's going to cook differently than you are a little green wing or cinnamon teal, right? This cooking a duck breast isn't just cooking a duck breast. It's understanding the size of that breast and pulling it at the temperature of that breast versus how long it's actually going to take.
Hey, Jeremiah, one thing that I'm a huge fan of too is brining waterfowl. I use a brand. I just use High Mountain Seasonings. They have a turkey and poultry brine. Something I just, not for a long period of time, especially like a mallard, a pintail, or something like that, depending on the duck, but just something that really takes, a lot of people eat waterfowl. It's that blood taste that you want to get out of there. Whether it's leaving it in the fridge, you can take care of that too. And sometimes I put it in some paper towels. It kind of pulls out a little bit of that. But I've used that brine really effectively, and I talk to everybody about that. Are you a fan of brining waterfowl?
Yeah, I think brining, adding a moisture back to something. So meat is like a sponge. And so it's super porous, right? If you actually look at it under a microscope, it looks like just cutting into a kitchen sponge. It's so full of just all these different fibers and tendons that touch. And so what happens to a lot of people is when they're letting that bird thaw, they're letting it thaw into its own juices, which is a negative aspect of it, right? So it's releasing all the stuff it wants to release, and then it's slowly sucking it all back into it. So when you are adding something else to it, so I'm not a big fan of like the buttermilk brine, like people like, oh, just put in buttermilk for 2 days. I'm not a fan of that because it really changes the flavor and the texture of the meat. Like I love eating wild meat. And so I'm like, I don't just want to eat, a biscuit that tastes like a duck. And so, but using the brines, what you're doing is as it's releasing, it's now absorbing into a positive flavor, right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
And so it's like if you take a sponge, you squeeze it out, you put it in dirty water, you're going to have a stinky, dirty sponge. If you squeeze out a sponge, you put it in clean water, it's going to absorb the clean water. And so thinking about it in terms of that, but I love hanging my ducks in the fridge for like 2 or 3 days. I have a small at-home dry ager. And so even throwing it in the dry ager for 4 to 5 days, guts out, because I don't care. I think it's gross that people leave guts in their animals because you don't know if you gut shot a duck or a pheasant either. And so letting that meat hang and really start to relax, right, and letting all of the negative kind of come out of it, I think is a huge benefit. But brining I'm all about it. I love brining wild turkeys, especially because they're so lean. And some of those early season ducks that you're getting that are super, super lean, I think brining them is a great method when you are lacking that fat.
Yeah, I just think it's, back to kind of what you said before, I think, as a big game hunter, when you pull the trigger, they say the work starts there. And I think that's true with anything, right? If you're going to, I'm the same way as you did. When I hunted as a kid and we would shoot ducks and come home and my sisters and my mom would be quacking at the dinner table and we shot these things and we were going to eat them and they weren't good. They were not good. And so, I've just been fortunate through this job, getting to be around folks like yourself and understanding and just kind of soaking up all the things. It's something that, you take care of that animal right when you put it down. And, back to your antelope story, I've heard so many of the same things that you better get on that animal, skin it out, throw it in within, minutes sometimes, or else you don't have one. And, just like with big game, with deer, I felt like for the last 6 weeks, all I've been doing is cutting up deer because I have been, and I've had a good year. And, I let them sit in my fridge. I have a fridge and quartered them up, and I hung them for 10 days before I cut on them. And the same with ducks. I'll do just like what you said, Jeremiah. I'll put them in the fridge and let them sit there for a while, and then get to them a few days later. I mean, and taking care of that blood, getting it out of there, brining them for waterfowl. I think it's a must. I think it's, you don't have to do it for, some people put in it for their day. I like duck. I don't want to do that. I want to take the taste and flavors of duck, but just that if there's a little edge on it, maybe draw out some of that blood that you haven't gotten out before you cleaned it and stuff like that. So,
yeah, and also you got to think about what the animal's eating, right? The reason a lot of people don't like diver ducks is because what they're eating when they're diving, right? And so you'll get that negative aspect to diver ducks. But if you're shooting rice patties on diver ducks, they're phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Like I've even eaten really good coot off of rice fields because all they're eating is good, right? They're not like going to the pond at, Worcester, which has been there since the 80s, and it's all just this brackish mud, and that's what they're feeding off of. Then that you're sitting there going, gosh, this freaking canvasback is disgusting. No, you're looking at birds and what they're eating. Same thing applies with all big game animals, right? If you're going into an area, so like a low mountain elk is going to taste completely different than a high mountain elk, just based on what they're eating. You're not sitting there eating that low mountain sage elk when they're like, oh, this tastes like sage. But when you get that animal, that's where you sit there and say, okay, what pairs well with sage, right? Instead of trying to mask the flavor, how can you elevate and enhance that flavor? So garlics, gingers, soys, that all enhances sage. Think about Asian style cooking with sage, really, really, really pairs well. And so, okay, so maybe I'm not going to take this. If I'm going to make burger ground out of it, I'm going to go ahead and make a teriyaki burger with it. Or I'm going to make some spicy peanut slaw to go on top of it, or fill in the blank, right? And I think once you start to think outside of your chilies, your spaghettis and your poppers, meat is meat. And so once you start to treat meat as meat, then it really opens up your culinary world to say, hey, I can do whatever I want. What's your favorite beef dish? Great. You can do that with duck. It's got the same sort of texture and flavor, or flavor profile when you bite into it as beef. So take your, whatever your favorite dish is with beef and recreate it with duck, and you'll be blown away that it's not just a popper or a breast that's just been cooked with beer,
I've got a question for, somebody who has the culinary experience, and I've been duck hunting a long time and heard different aspects of this, but I've opened up, say, pintail that have been harvested in a rice field in January, and their fat is just like white. And then you harvest a gadwall in the Sioux marsh brackish water, and you open up and it is like almost yellow. Radioactive orange yellow. And then is it true that their fat color will take on sort of kind of what their flavor is going to be?
100%. Yes. So it's same thing when think about someone's finishing a heritage hog, right? So you go to the grocery store, you buy a hog, or you go somewhere, you buy a high-end hog. There's always a finishing period, right? The reason you have a finishing period, even if you're going to buy a cow, they bring them in the stockades and they have a finishing period where they're going to pack them full of whatever kind of that fat flavor, fat texture, fat marbling that they want. So if you look at guys who are raising Peking ducks, they've got a feed that they're feeding them, and then before they're going to harvest them, before they're going to kill them and put them on a table, they're going to start doing a finishing feed. And so that applies to all critters. And so there are some animals that just have a different color fat. Like you shoot a zebra, it's going to have a neon orange, yellow fat, no matter where you shoot it. That's just the fat of a zebra. And some of you guys are like, what? You shot a zebra? They're phenomenal. Horse meat. If we could legally hunt horses, I'd be doing it every day. And so you really have to look at those characteristics. Like I've shot coot off of everything, and they still have that same kind of yellow, nasty fat, right? Shoot sometimes pheasant, no matter what they're eating, they'll have that same sort of orangish, yellow fat going through them. But when it comes to a duck, you're really going to tell the flavor on what they're eating with that brackish water. And the bugs are going to have a different, make to them that are going to create a different fat. I've shot bear off of blueberry fields, or blueberry, the side of a mountain that's covered in blueberries, and their fat is purple, and their fat tastes like just sweet blueberries. Like I love making biscuits with, blueberry bear fat. And so, but then there's also bears that are eating trash in Montana. These guys are out there just scrapping them to try to bring bear in that are completely inedible because of what they're eating and what they're doing. So,
do you on the back to the ducks? Do you recommend, say you shoot a gatwell with that orange fat? Do you recommend getting rid of that skin and fat and preparing it a different way, or are you still okay to leave skin on and bake it or grill it with it on?
Yeah, I mean, you can always render that fat out. But even when it comes to that case, you can always skin the duck, pluck it, skin it, keep that skin, scrape that fat off, and then use that skin as something to wrap back around it, or using that as a crispy duck skin as a topping. Once you get kind of that negative fat off of it. But again, it all comes down to the taste of it. You don't want to throw out all the ducks if you're like, that fat really didn't have a negative taste to it. It was just a different color. But there are some ducks that I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I think I'm just going to skin that sucker out or throw them in the crock pot and break it down for tamales or tacos or something.
You mentioned you shot some coot in your day. I mean, how are you preparing that? I think most people would, be disgusted by it, but we've had some folks that have harvested coot and served it to people without them knowing, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is delicious. What is it?" And then they're like, "It's coot," and they're like, "Turn green."
Oh, I did the same thing. So we were at San Jacinto, and we were hunting, and we were coming off of one of the primary blinds, like the bee blinds.
Yeah.
And there were these two Asian gentlemen, and they were coming out with 2 trash bags completely full. And I'm like, what did they shoot? Like, I'm thinking, oh, they're going to get in trouble. Like, because we heard so much shooting over there. And we're like, what? Like, are they just bad shots? No, there was no calling, no nothing. And they get to the checkout about the same time we are, and they dump out 50 coot. And I'm like, you just shot 50 coot? Like, good on you. Like, thanks for the duck eggs, like, for the next year. But, like, why? And this Filipino dude starts telling me about all these different dishes. And they prefer that meat over, he kept saying, the disgusting colored ones. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, are you talking about a northern shoveler? Because if you're talking about a shoveler, I agree with you. Like, those aren't the best tasters. But I'm like, I've got 6, cinnamons right here, and I would eat their legs before I would eat a coot. And so this guy's like, no, amazing meat. And I was like, all right, cool. Here's my phone number. Call me. I'm going to come over. So I literally followed them home. They were in Moreno Valley, so they weren't very far from San Jac. And we go there, and all his little kids coming out. They're all super excited. His little nephews come out, and they start plucking the coot. I'm like, they're plucking coot? Like, I thought they were just going to breast these suckers out, grind them, And so I'm like, well, what meals are you going to make? So he started talking about how coot have a very fishy, muddy flavor. And I was like, yes, they do. You are 100% correct. In Asian cuisine, what do they use a lot of? Fish sauce, oyster sauce, right? So they love that flavor. And so they started making egg rolls. They started making soups. They started making stews. And I'm eating this going, this is incredible. Like, this is phenomenal. So then I started thinking, well, what other cultures eat sort of that fishy flavors and really love it? So I'm like, all right, Cajun cooking. Let's try it. So I actually I went out and I shot my limit of coot. Everyone thought I was crazy. I came home and I ground up all the coot with a little bit of pork fat, and I made andouille sausages out of the coot. And then I made a gumbo with the andouille coot sausage. And one of my friends, Sean Kibler, was another guy who made andouille sausage, and is what we were talking about, and served it to a ton of people. I'm like, hey, this is a duck gumbo. And they were like, this is amazing. Oh, this is, they're, I'm like, okay. Well, they're like, what duck was it? And I was like, coot. And they're like, and so I think once you take away the negative stigma on something, right? And you understand the flavor of it, just like I was shooting aoudad, and a bunch of Texans will tell you aoudad's the worst tasting meat out there, right? Dirty, nasty, smelly sheep. And I was like, well, I'll prove it wrong. So we went out and we shot an aoudad. We bring it back, and I'm like, okay, well, again, what cultures eat old, smelly, stinky sheeps and goats? Okay, so we're looking at Indian culture. We're looking at Pakistani culture, pretty much any Middle Eastern culture. We're looking at Irish and Scottish who are eating mutton. Okay, so how can I take those recipes and apply them to the same actual animal, right? An old billy or an old ewe. And I cooked for a bunch of hardcore Texas hunters, and they ate the entire table. And then I'm like, okay, well, here's a video of what we shot today. And they all watch it. They're like, we just ate Aw, Dad. I'm like, yep. And so I think, again, once you take away the negative stigma, or as us in the USA, like, ew, gross, right? You take away the ew factor of it, food is delicious. And I think we just have this negative, because we try to cook it like a chicken, right? When it can't be cooked like that. It needs to be cooked on its own term because it's its own meat.
Yeah, and I think that's what's hard too, is like when you're trying to prepare it for somebody and they think wild game, and then they see that, rare to medium rare duck breast that's sliced, and they immediately like kind of get grossed out and like, oh, I'm not going to eat that. But once they do eat it, they're like, oh wow, I've been missing out. That's, it's perfectly marbled, it's hard crust on the outside, it's perfect cut of meat. But it's getting to kind of over that hurdle, which is, to me, the battle.
Yeah, I think it's awesome for me when I cook something, especially in my neighborhood, my block. My neighbors know when I'm cooking. I have one neighbor that I'm always bringing it down, whatever it is, and he just says, "I'm never moving." Yeah. and I think you'd agree with this, Jeremiah. That I think food, we kind of touched on it earlier, it's such a bridge to the non-hunting community. Especially, we just went through these times with COVID. Every hunter I knew was like, I don't need to go to the store and buy meat. I'm good. Yeah. And so I think it's just awesome that there's folks like yourself out there putting out these recipes that are so easy for the average person to go do. I'm such a big fan of those types of things because, you got to put stuff out there for hunters to enjoy it. Like myself, when we didn't know how to cook it, and it wasn't any good. It was we ate it because we shot it. But now to be able to take that and, it's funny, with my kids growing up, I used to make tacos and I wouldn't tell them it was deer meat, but I wouldn't tell them. And their parents would say, my daughter never likes tacos at home. And I'm like, well, it's deer meat. And it was a different flavor. You prepare it properly. But, how much you see, Jeremiah, where you're at, where, that food that you're preparing is such a bridge to the non-hunter. And I think it's another way to combat the craziness in the state that we go for, the negativity on hunting. Is food and wine are always something that people have common with. And when I don't know, I'm sure you've put plenty of times, you put recipes in front of people and, I don't want to say you change their mind, but I think you make them think a little bit differently about hunting.
Yeah. One of my biggest stories is a couple years ago, I was getting some hardcore death threats. PETA put out my phone number. They put out my personal information. And so I was getting like 400 to 500 calls a day. And my wife was getting mad at me because I was answering every single call. She's like, just turn your phone off. I'm like, no, if there's one person that I can change their mind. And I pick up the phone and it'd be like, bleepity, bleep, 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 bleep. And I'm like, God bless you. And right. Or there's someone like, oh, I can't believe you did that. Well, let me tell you why I did this. Well, through that whole thing, there was this gentleman who was very hardcore, like to the point where I could have called the cops and had him arrested. But I just showed him respect and love. And I was like, hey, this is why I do it. Let's talk. Let's have a conversation. And he was open to a conversation, right? And so he started following me on social media. Every day he would ask me questions. I'd post a recipe and he'd be like, why? And we'd have this full-on conversation. Well, 6 months go by and he's like, I think I want to go dove hunting with you. And I was like, you want to what? He's like, I want to go dove hunting with you. And I was like, this is the guy that just said he wanted to string me up by a flagpole and gut me like I gut a deer. And I was like, well, get your hunting license. The only thing I can't do for you is take your hunter safety course. Everything else from guns, ammo, spots, I can do, but I cannot go to the class for you. And I kind of left it hanging. Like, here you go. Figure it out. Well, it's middle of August and he writes me and says, okay, I got my hunting license. And I was like, what? Like, this is a hardcore vegan, hadn't eaten meat in 21 years. And I'm like, you gotta be crazy, right? And you continue to follow through this story of him. He ends up coming on a hunt with my family. So every year I take out about 40 new hunters, youth, adults, whatever, family members, about 40 of us. We go out to Blythe and we have a dove hunt. And we just kill it, right? I got farmers out there that let us hunt fields. And so he's coming up and I talked to my buddies, hey, you guys got your guns? Because he's pulling up. Like, I don't want to say he's going to shoot me, but I don't know who this guy is, right? So he comes onto the dove fields. All of us have our trucks, and he pulls up in a Prius, and I'm like, of course, it's a Prius, right? And he gets out of his car, and I walk up to shake his hand, and my brother's like got his pistol, like, you know, in his chest, you know, like all. And I go up, and this guy shakes my hand. I said, "All right, man, you ready for this?" He goes, "Yeah, I'm ready for it." I'm like, "Perfect. Let's go to my truck and let's get you a gun." And everyone's still like, "Dude, you're going to give this guy a gun?" I'm like, 100%. And so we walk over and get him a gun, show him how to work it. You know, throw a couple. This is like the day before. Throw a couple clays. Okay, cool. Tomorrow morning, this is what time. This is where we're going to be. I'm going to set you up right next to me. My daughter's going to be right here. You're going to be right. You know, like he's like, okay. Dude's a little skinny beanpole guy covered in tattoos. Comes out and doves start flying, and I'm like, you know, just drilling them. I look over and he's just watching them fly over. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, all right, hey, coming right down at you, 12 o'clock, it came right over the trees, just like one of those like Eurasians, just like barely fluttering. I'm like, this is the perfect shot, right? I go, whenever you're ready. And he lifts his shotgun up, shoots the bird, and it drops like 5 feet in front of him. And I'm like, yeah, I'm all hooting and hollering. And he just stares at this bird. And I'm like, oh, crap. Right? So I put my gun in safety, set it down, look at my daughter. I'm like, hey, go over with Grandpa. I'll be right back. So I go walk over to him like, hey, what's going on, man? He goes, I just killed it. I was like, you did? Like, it's dead. And I was like, but that's not where its story ends. I go, its story is going to end tonight when we're eating it and we're having a conversation about today and we're laughing and we're joking. And there's this whole story around that shot. And we sat there and I said, but if you're done, you're done. And I'm done also. We'll walk back to the car right now. He's like, you would be done? I was like, 100%, dude. Like, there's nothing more than I would want to do than be done. And he's like, we're going to eat this bird? I was like, we're going to eat this bird. He goes, okay, well then I better get a couple more because that's not enough. And I was like, all right. And so I walk back over and he starts shooting. And we finish out and we go back to camp and he's like, okay, teach me. And I was like, well, this is how you pluck them. They're really easy to pluck. This is how you skin them. This is how you breast them. Like there's the 3 methods that you can do on this bird. He's like, okay, great. And then we play in the river. We have a good time. And then that night at dinner, we go sitting around and I made like an orange glaze for all the dove and I'm grilling them on the Traeger and he comes over and I go, okay, this is your bird. Like I had left one leg on. So I knew that was his very first bird he had shot. Right. And I hand it to him. I said, all right. And he goes, I haven't had a bite of meat in 21 years. My whole entire family is around this dude now, right? Like all our friends, all our family looking at this dude that looks nothing like us. And he sits there and he takes a bite of the dove. I have a video. I've shared it before. It's still on my phone, still like one of my favorites saved. And he starts like laugh, crying, smiling. And he goes, that's good. That's been 21 years. And he goes, thanks, Jeremiah. Thanks. And to me, that's that epitome of coming at somebody with respect and food, right? I won him over by showing the respect to the animal, by making a beautiful, delicious meal, by having a cultural aspect behind the meal, by defining why we're doing it and who we're doing it for. I could have went out there and just blew the crap out of all my dove and be like, I'm done, let's go, you know? And I didn't. I took the time to educate. I took the time to be there with him, and I took the time to take the chance on him, right? I didn't know this guy. We're now really, really good friends. He's actually taken his kids out. They're hunting pheasant. They're bird hunters like crazy now. You know, he'll go out on pheasant hunts, and he'll show me these pictures. He ended up getting a bird dog because he loves bird hunting so much. And to think about a guy that was a vegan for 21 years, who now is an avid hunter feeding his family, telling a different story. He calls himself a hunting vegan. He won't eat any meat or animal byproducts unless he kills it himself. And so to me, I'm like, I respect you more than any other hunter out there because you're truly doing it for the meat and you're truly doing it for the experience. And I mean, that's just one story of the 10,000 stories that I have from a culinary side of hunting. And I have no desire to become famous. I have no desire to go have a TV show on Outdoor Life and have my name plastered all over shirts. But I have a desire to sit in a blind next to somebody who's never shot an animal before and cry with them like a freaking little schoolgirl when they shoot their first deer, and hug and embrace this person and hear their story. 2 weekends ago, we took out an 83-year-old man on probably his last deer hunt. And with it was a Navy veteran, was stationed over in Vietnam before it was a Vietnam War. Then he was stationed over during the Cuban Missile Crisis. He was like the first defense at Cuba. And hearing this guy tell these stories as his grandson is just all excited about him shooting a deer. That's why I do what I do. And then to be able to, at the end of the day, come and prepare a meal for somebody, and I'll sit there and laugh and smile and cry together as we're eating food. Like, I don't care who you are. I don't care what your background is, but when it's surrounded by food and laughter, I think it really, like I said, breaks that wall. We had a thing where we had a bunch of left and right wing crazy people. And I said, I got an idea. Let's bring them all to the same table. This guy's like, you're nuts, right? Like, you're going to bring these people who are like at each other's throats. I'm left, you're right after COVID. You need to wear a mask, F you, right? This whole thing that's going crazy. And that they're at the dinner table. There's like 5 on each side, and they are just at each other's throats. And all of a sudden, I put out all this wild game. I had shot a huge hog, split the hog, had the hog out there, no utensils, just onions, peppers, fresh homemade tortillas, beans, rice. And I said, okay, today's dinner is all about your hands, because nothing has touched this meal but my hands. And so now it's your guys' hands that are going to touch this meal. So no silverware is even respectful enough. There was no arguing or fighting at all. As soon as the last bite was taken, all of a sudden it was like, well, you know what? My thought on, and I'm like, proved a fact that food shuts everybody up because it's such an equalizer. And if it can bring people together, be it a vegan meal, be it a deer meal, be it a beautiful mallard, then I'm all about it.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, we've in our R3 programs have seen, especially those adult onset hunters, kind of that farm to fork movement where we get all those calls of never hunted before, don't own a gun, not really pro gun. What do I do and how do I get into it? I do want to eat meat if I do harvest it myself. We do a college camp program with a bunch of UC Davis students, and a lot of them are vegan or vegetarian, but they're okay with shooting something and then eating it themselves. And we've seen a huge influx of hunters just from the food side of it, right? Where those folks would never get into hunting if it wasn't for the actual knowing where your meat came from, going out and getting it yourself, and then preparing the meal that way. So,
yeah, and I think COVID was a big positive in that aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Because of the
jumping
fact that
license sales, right?
Oh yeah, but I think everyone. I know for me personally down here in Southern California, when all the grocery stores went out of meat, right? I have 3 giant freezers completely packed. I shot 100 deer, like in 2019, between all my classes and stuff. Right? I had literally like one whole thing was just 172, massive 7.5, whatever. Just all ground. One was all steaks. One was all ducks and birds. One was all fish. Like, you go in my garage, just walls of freezers. And so COVID hit, and all these people started freaking out. And so I looked at my wife and said, all right. And I made care packages. I literally got boxes, and I put 6 or 7 different types of meat. I did, Traeger. I know these guys that had Traegers did Traeger pellets. If guys had charcoal, I did charcoal briskets. And I just walked to doors, knocked on it, handed them. I'm like, here you go. If you need more, just call me, right? People that had never eaten wild game before are calling me like, hey, I want to go get my license. How do I do this? And I was like, cool, let's do it. And just from that 20 guys that I handed food to, 16 of them are now hunters and go hunting with me, deer hunting, bird hunting, antelope hunting, pheasant hunting, duck hunting, right? All because during COVID, I said, hey, I got you, right? And they were like, oh, you mean I can feed my family but not have to go to the grocery store? I'm like, yeah. And then also, like, we live on the ocean. Do you know, if COVID really went crazy, I was like, I have an endless supply of fish and lobster and seagulls. I've never eaten a seagull, but I could probably make it taste good. Huh. Right? Like, I have an endless supply of food. Like, I remember during COVID, we were driving, and there's a park by us called Mile Square Park. And it's got like 10,000 Canadas out there, right? And I remember we were driving by, my daughter goes, how many of those do you think we can get before we get arrested? I was like, at least 10, right? Like, but that's my daughter's mindset too, is like, we don't need to go to the grocery store when they see these beautiful fat Canadas just eating grass out there. They're like, we can take those, Dad. I'm like, oh yeah, especially my girls with their 22s. I mean, they're hitting nickels at 50 yards. You don't think they can hit a freaking goose head at 50 yards? So I was like, yeah, bring it all day long. Like, bring on the shutdown, because my family is going to be thriving while everyone else is, trying to plug in an electric car. So.
No, that's awesome. I've been scrolling your website and listening to you talk about, and I'm getting very hungry. And some of these recipes look amazing. If you were to have to choose your favorite out of what you have currently on your website, what do you think that would be for recipe wise?
Shoot, I don't know. There's like 100 and something recipes on there.
Give me some of your tops.
That's like choosing your favorite child. You have one, you just don't want to say it out loud. I would have to say probably my super juice marinade that's on there. It's got over 1 million pens. Last month alone, it had 200,000 clicks on the website. And so it's a simple, easy, stupid marinade that you could marinate from a duck to a dove to a deer to a moose, all in between. And the story's on there about how I came up with the name. It was one of those deals I was throwing a bunch of stuff together, marinated it, cooked it. My daughters are like, this is phenomenal. I was like, oh yeah. So then I'm like, hey Dad, make that super juice marinade again. And I was like, what? Oh, the one you did in that deer. And I was like, oh, I should probably write that down. But it's become one of my most popular recipes on there, because it can be used for anything and everything. And it's got soy in there, like soy sauce. So what that does is that helps actually break down and tenderize the meat. It's stupid. Like, you can throw a couple duck breasts in there, leave it in there for 8 hours, take them out, cook it. It's going to change your mind on duck. And so I think if I had to look at one, that would probably be it, just because it's so universal. But then you get into some of the really fun, weird stuff that I do, like, stuffing wild boar into little shooters of.
I saw that one. I think I'm going to try that. That looks awesome.
And so it's just one of those deals where I get my ideas when I talk to people, and they are like, oh, like I have an orange pheasant recipe on there. And from years ago, I was guiding a bunch of pheasant people for our youth program out here. I mean, you guys have it too up there, where they can put in, like the family hunts. Mm-hmm. And this dad had 2 sons, and the 2 sons were hunting, and the first son shot a pheasant. He was like 9 years old. I'm like, dude, this is awesome. And his dad's like, you can take it. Pheasant tastes like dirt. We're not eating it. And the look on this kid's face when he shot this animal was like, wait, I'm not going to eat it? And so I was like, hey, what's your favorite dish in the entire world? Like, one thing that you would eat. And he's like, orange chicken from Panda Express. I was like, what? Any dish? He's like, yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm going to create you an orange panda sauce that you're going to cook with your dad, these pheasant. So take them home. And so they shot their limit, him and his brothers, and then they left. I took like 2 weeks to really nail down this perfect recipe. My wife's like, I don't want to eat another piece of orange pheasant in my life. And I'm like, just deal with it. And so I sent it off. This dad cooked it with his family, and he writes back and goes, I want to apologize. That was phenomenal. We had such a good time as a family cooking. Like, I really want to thank you for that. And so for me, it's listening to people's stories and understanding it, as well as I've traveled the world. So what are things that people are eating? What are people, what are some of these cultures that are eating things that we're throwing away? And so when I look inside the animal now, it's like, oh, gizzards, hearts, livers. Okay, great. Yeah. Well, hey, what's inside their gullets? Okay. So that's their flavor profile. Like, we shot a turkey, and I opened up its whole entire gullet area. And I'm like, oh, look, it's full of rosemary and lemon seeds and lemon peel. I was like, all right. So I'm looking around. There's a whole bunch of wild rosemary growing, and then there's like a lemon orchard or grove, whatever they call it. I think it's grove because but anyway, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to cook this bird with lemon and rosemary now, because that's what it's been eating, and that's the flavor that's going to be into it. And so all of a sudden, this whole beautiful marry of rosemary and lemon come together that I create this dish. And my wife's like, make that again. And then I open up the next turkey, and it's, full of apples. Well, now I'm going to cook it with apples, right? So I think that's kind of where it comes to, is don't be afraid to dissect your animal and really understand who they are and what they are as a meat source.
I think too, Jeremiah, one thing, and I know we just shared this recipe of yours on social media, I believe, and one that I think is the most underutilized part of a duck is its legs and thighs. And I tell you what, everybody that I talk to, I mean, I did a video on our own YouTube, and it's just something that once you prepare them and you do them right. I know your recipe's over some nachos, but it starts with low and slow and cooking them in duck fat. I think, if you're a duck hunter out there and you're not eating those legs and thighs, you're disservice to yourself, your stomach, because it's good stuff. But talk about that recipe that we just talked about. It's a duck nachos, right?
Yeah, I think it was like duck confit fries.
Fries.
I think is what it was. Yeah, and I think for me, it's always been about saving the legs.
Yep.
Like 5 years ago with NWTF, National Wild Turkey Federation, we started a whole movement called Save the Legs, because I was sick of seeing guys shoot these big old 25-pound birds and only take the two little breasts off of it. And so what I did for that one is I measured out, I took all the meat off the thighs, the legs, slow cooked it, weighed it out. And I'm like, you're throwing away 3 pounds of turkey meat, delicious shredded turkey meat that you could be eating, that you just left in the dumpster because it's too much work. So then I said, okay, well, how can we do this with ducks and quail? Like little quail legs are my favorite. Like I'll cook a quail and just sit there and eat it like a little, and then use a little leg as a toothpick afterward. It's phenomenal. But for ducks, they do hold this natural fat. Even if you can't see the fat, there's still a marbleized fat within the meat itself, just like you would find in beef. That's why I always said, if you really like a beef dish, try it with duck. And so in this one, it makes it real easy because a lot of people might not have a lot of duck fat lying around, but kind of using that sous vide style method with cooking these legs. So saving all those legs, save it all season long. Like save a big bag of legs because there's not that much meat. If you're getting a little teal or you're getting a little widgeon, there's not that much meat on those legs and thighs, but save them. Then throw them all. If you don't have a vacuum sealer or a fancy sous vide machine, that's fine. But put them in a double Ziploc bag, right? And then bring water up to whatever temperature you want. Usually you're shooting for like 125, 130. And then you're going to bathe those in that bag and slowly cook it. And you're going to let that meat itself cook and break down. And all of its own juices are what's going to go into that bag and start to cook it. If you want to throw some butter, some rosemary, some thyme, some garlic, whatever you want in there to slowly cook down that sous vide as well. And you're going to let that just go. You're going to let it go until you pick up that bag and that meat just falls away from the bone. And then you can utilize that meat however you want. If you want to put it on tacos, if you want to put it on top of pasta, if you want to put it on top of whatever. I just happened to really want to make like a dirty loaded French fry with it. And it turned out incredible. Just because I like fries. I'm from Southern California. Like we call it a California burger, right? Or a California burrito. We throw French fries and avocado in our burritos and call it a California burrito because we're obsessed with fried potatoes. And so utilizing that duck in a different way, I think is huge. A lot more so than a lot of people that are just like, oh, look, it's just a breast. There's so much meat on those thighs and those legs when you keep them all together and break that down. But yeah, go on there and look. And I've got a December recipe coming up. It's going to be wild boar that you guys are going to share too. So I think it's kind of cool that it's not just going to be duck. If you're out there hunting anything, we're going to have recipes for it. And I signed on for a whole year with you guys of sending recipes. So keep an eye on social medias because they're going to be up. So
yeah, the website he's referring to is fromfieldtoplate.com. So if you want to go directly to that is the link.
Yep. And then you guys are also going to be sharing it too. California Waterfowl is going to be sharing recipes all year long. So kind of excited about that as well.
So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit, but so you got your beef allergy later on in life. Do you think that kind of jump started you into getting outside of birds and hunting, big game, or were you kind of already on that path?
No, I wasn't on that path at all. I was a bird guy. It really, that beef allergy thrust me into a world that I never expected I would ever be in. I expected to finish out my life, front of the house manager. I was a GM at restaurants and doing that sort of thing. And when it came down to it, it was one of those deals where it was still just a hobby. Once I got into big game, So beef allergy, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, bird hunting. Come into 2011, that's when I met that dude out in the turkey or out in the archery range to go turkey hunting. And so that's where my big game career started. And then I just did kind of my own thing with antelope. I only hunted antelope. I didn't hunt any other big game. And that was 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. And then 2015, I went hunting with a buddy and we shot, some blacktail and some muleys. And I was like, oh, this is fun. This is, I'm already shooting 619 yards at antelope. So shooting 100 yards at a muley was like, this is easy, and getting into them bedding and just waiting for them to stand up was a lot easier than crawling on my belly through, Wyoming plains where the tallest piece of grass is 6 inches, where I can sit up on a ridge and glass. And then going into summer of 2017, I started from field to plate, or the beginning of 2017 started from field to plate. As just an online blog source to go get recipes and stories about hunting. Really nothing of it, nothing really. There was a couple people following it. And then summer of 2017, I blew my calf muscle out all the way up into my Achilles. It went all the way up into my kneecap. And so I was out of work for 6 months. And during that 6 months, I was just like, I have nothing better to do. I'm just going to write recipes and learn how to photograph. And so I sat there, taught myself how to take pictures. But I look back at those pictures I took back in 2017, and I'm like, why did people even start following me compared to what I'm taking now? But back then, right, it was still who I was today. And started taking those pictures, and then it came time for me to go back to work. And I looked at my wife, I said, I don't want to go back. Like, I want to do this for a living. And my wife's like, well, you haven't been this happy ever. And my wife and I have been together since senior year of high school, so she knew me better than anybody. She's like, you're happy. We've got 2 little girls at home. You have a 3-year-old and you have a 5-year-old. Like, do what you're going to do. And I remember just like, okay, well, I don't know, still hemming and hawing. And then I went to church that Sunday, and our pastor was preaching on cannonballing. He said, in life, everyone says, just dive into something, right? He goes, but when you dive into a pool, the only person you affect is yourself, right? You want to make the perfect dive. No splash. Just you're in the water. He goes, in life, you need to cannonball. You need to jump out off that high dive, and you need to commit, because when you do a perfect cannonball, it affects everybody in the pool as well as everybody outside the pool. Your ripple goes all the way to the end of the pool and comes back to you, and you hear all the people and you feel all the emotion that was in there. And all the people that are outside the pool just felt your impact by the splash. And now they're all soaking wet because of your decision. I was like, okay, cool sermon. And then he comes to me after and goes, Jeremiah, I got 3,000 members in our church. And he's like, hey, that sermon was for you, and I don't know why. And I was like, ooh. And my wife's like nudging me, like, I told you. And so we get home, and I was like, man, I don't know what to do. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna cannonball. I'm gonna go full force. I'm gonna make a giant splash, and I'm gonna do this. So I went into work. When I had to go back, I said, hey, I'm not coming back. And they were like throwing money at me. We got to keep you. We got, you're the trainer. You're the corporate guy. I was like, yeah, no, it's not about the money. Like, I know I'm going to lose a lot of money doing this, but it's about my happiness and about other people's happiness around me. Because right now it's like, I'm not happy. And so I quit the job, and my wife said, give it 2 years. Like, work your butt off for 2 years. With what I'm making and what our savings is, you got 2 years. And I remember that first year I hunted 200 out of 365 days that year. I mean, I just gave it a go. Traveled the entire world with anybody that wanted me to come hunt with them. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. And that's what, 2016, 17 to today. And now I'm making a great living, hanging out at, my house and cooking every single night for my family. And my daughters don't eat domestic meat at all. And my wife's happy. I'm happy, and I've touched how many other lives by this cannonballing into this pool that we call wild game. And I've been a part of a lot of professional hunters' careers that I'm happy to look at and say, hey, I was there when you did this, or I was a part of that. And I'm happy to be the guy that, like on my Pinterest, a lot of these females that come to my class are women, wives, girlfriends of hunters who hunters don't want to take them hunting, but want them to cook for them. And these ladies find a recipe on Pinterest that's mine. They love it. Then they see that I offer classes. And they say, well, can women do it? And I said, anybody can do it. I don't care. And all of a sudden these women are going out and they're out hunting and out shooting their husbands and boyfriends. And then I'm getting calls from these boyfriends saying, what did you do? Thank you. Sometimes it's negative, sometimes it's positive, but it's like just being there and being open to be a part of someone's life, I think is huge. And yeah, food did that. And I don't ever look back at my food allergy and say, man, I wish I could eat beef. Like I thank God every single day that I'm allergic to beef, because if I was eating beef, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation. How many lives wouldn't have been impacted if I didn't cannonball into the wild game world, and look at these old timers who are doing beautiful culinary dishes with wild game that no one's cooking anymore because it's not relevant. Like for me, food is food. I'm going to cook food for my family to eat, not to serve under glass at a party. And that's how it's going to happen. And that's how most of America utilizes wild game meat. It's not something fancy for a party. I'm going to eat this every single day until it's gone. So,
man, that's a phenomenal story, and we're super excited to be sharing your recipes with our members, and we're just really looking forward to all the stuff that's coming. And just want to say thank you so much, Jeremiah, with Field to Plate, for coming out and joining us on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Save It for the Blind podcast. You can find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.